Now, Caleb Maupin is one of my very favorite commentators. I love talking to him. I love hearing him talk, not just when I'm interviewing him, but as a colleague of mine on RT America. I appear every night there, either on the Rick Sanchez show night at our time, it's lunchtime there, on the Rick Sanchez show, or with Manila Chan on the wonderful In Question show. And I often get to hear Caleb's wisdom, and you should pay attention now too. Welcome, Caleb, to the show. Wonderful to see you as always. The bobbing MAGA hats in downtown DC, that looks quite ugly. How's it going now?
Well, there is a huge base of support for Donald Trump, and we saw that on the streets of D.C. this weekend. A big showing of support, a lot of Trump supporters out there in big numbers, making clear they don't consider this election to be over. They are contesting the results. George, it's like comedy, all right? So this morning we have Donald Trump tweeting out, he won because the left rigged the election. And immediately, all the mainstream media in the United States just jumps on this. Trump says Biden won. He's conceded. He's conceded. And then, of course, we then have Donald Trump coming out and saying, no, I concede nothing. I mean, this is just getting to be comedy, getting to be ridiculous. The mainstream media has decided that the election is over, that Biden is the winner, and that seems to be pretty universally accepted. But regardless, Donald Trump is not accepting it, and mainstream media is just looking for any opportunity to say that he has. The divisions among our elite in the United States are very, very deep.
Does he have a basis for rejecting the result?
Well, he's pointed to a computer glitch in Michigan. He has pointed to instances where there were dead people voting around the country. So he has pointed to some irregularities here, some irregularities there. But the question that I have is that really enough to say that the entire results of the election is that really enough to say that the entire results of the election are illegitimate? I'm not yet convinced, right? And he'll need to convince a judge of that. He'll need to show that somehow the results of the election, would have changed because of these irregularities. I'm not seeing that yet, but he does. At this point, they say they have 11,000 alleged instances. So we'll have to see what they come up with in court.
When you say court, you mean in the first instance, state courts, I presume, not the Supreme Court, where one presumes Donald Trump's arguments might flourish.
Well, I mean, it would have to go to a local court first, and then it would have to be appealed to a federal court, and then the Supreme Court would have to decide to hear the case. That's the process that it would have to go through. And I wouldn't be sure that Donald Trump really has a majority on the Supreme Court. The Republican Party certainly does, but a lot of the justices were appointed by neoconservative Republicans, not by Donald Trump. And while, Brett Kavanaugh, I feel like what he went through during his confirmation hearings might have cemented his loyalty to Donald Trump. What Amy Coney Barrett recently went through as she was put onto the Supreme Court, they might be in Trump's camp, but I'm not sure that you can be sure that John Roberts and that other justices on the Supreme Court are going to have Donald Trump's back. I think that a lot of the establishment, a lot of the neocons, a lot of people even within Donald Trump's own party are telling him to simply accept the results. And I'm not sure the Supreme Court would necessarily step in and give the election to Trump. I'm not sure we're going to see a repeat of the 2000 election here, because it seems like such a broad consensus in American mainstream media that despite whatever irregularities went on, they're saying that this is Joe Biden's victory, that he is the winner. But what's interesting, I will note, is that the president of Mexico is not congratulating Joe Biden. AMLO, López Obrador, the president of Mexico, he says that he's been the victim of voter fraud, and he knows what voter fraud is like, and he says Trump is somebody he's been able to negotiate with. So we have the left-wing president of Mexico not congratulating Donald Trump, or not congratulating Joe Biden, not admitting and accepting the results of this election. So that's quite a development, I think.
Who's doing the fighting in D.C.? I saw some horrific pictures.
Indeed. Well, that has just become a staple of American political life over the past, couple years. We have, these right-wing organizations like the Proud Boys that go out there. We have these left-wing groups that call themselves Antifa, and they go out and they fight in the streets. And we've seen it in Oregon and in Seattle with Patriot Prayer. We've seen it. We saw it in Charlottesville with the horrendous incident a few years ago, and that this kind of situation where we have street fighting between left-wing groups and right-wing groups, that's starting to become just an everyday aspect of American life. It's reminding people almost of the Weimar Republic or something. I mean, that's not how the United States used to be. Sure, we've always had protests and demonstrations, but never has it become routine to have the far left and the far right in the streets fighting each other. And what's more disturbing is that this is the United States of America. So in a lot of cases, there are firearms present at these confrontations between left-wing groups and right-wing groups. Both sides are packing iron, so to speak. So it's a little bit more dangerous than it might be in a European country. So this is certainly a disturbing situation where we're starting to see scuffles just routinely happen on American streets.
Now, let's assume that the fat ladies in the Supreme Court don't sing and that it's over. The Joe Biden cabinet is shaping up every bit as gruesome as many people predicted that it would.
Indeed. I mean, Secretary of Defense, they're talking about Michelle Flournoy, big supporter of the U.S. invasion of Iraq, big advocate of U.S. intervention in Libya. A lot of people are looking at the Biden administration and saying, we used to talk about Wall Street running America, but it seems like if you look at who the Biden administration is working with these execs from Facebook, these execs from Google, this is going to be Silicon Valley's America. The tech giants seem to be taking over, and they suppressed the stories about Hunter Biden and his nefarious activities during the election. Twitter banned it, Facebook banned it. They suppressed negative news about Biden, and that this looks like the White House is going to very much belong to the tech corporations based in California. They seem to be the new rulers of American capitalism.
What could possibly go wrong? The payback for them is places sprinkled liberally throughout the cabinet, and in return for which they suppress all other alternative views. What could possibly go wrong? On that subject, we hear talk that Trump is going to set up a television station. That would seem logical to me. Do you think he will?
Oh, of course. Donald Trump is definitely going to move in that direction. Look, I don't think we're ever going to hear the words "I lost" or "I concede" come out of Donald Trump's mouth. I suspect that in all likelihood he will be leaving office in January, but I really doubt he will ever admit defeat. He will say this was rigged, and he will continue to build up a base of supporters. But this is very important for the American conservatives right now, because at this point, Republicans, conservatives in the United States really don't have an identity, right? Bush-era neoconservatism is dead. And at this point, Donald Trump is really, really essential, because at this point, other than his cult of personality and some of his cliches about anti-communism and his anti-immigrant demagogy, that's really all he has. That's really all the Republican Party has as an identity. Donald Trump is essential because American conservatives are pretty lost. Now, there's a similar identity crisis on the American left. We see that just after the election, they're already the Democratic leadership is already trying to, target and demonize the Democratic Socialist wing, attack Bernie Sanders, attack Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. But there is a huge identity crisis on the American right. And Donald Trump is a personality that can hold the American right together. So he's essential. And after leaving office, I expect he will continue to be an entity holding the right wing together. I expect he will probably run again in 2024.
Well, I was going to ask you that. But before I do, I've got to say that the circumstances you just described point to me to a gap in the political market in America. Is anybody thinking about that?
There is, at this point, a lot of confusion. People look at the two major parties and see that they both look like they're on the verge of a split. You have Democratic Socialists and the People's Party that seem to be out of step with the Democratic National Committee. And you have the Trump movement that seems very, very out of step with the Republican leadership. And it seems like the bases of the parties are moving in a populist, anti-establishment direction. but the party machines still continue to be run by people that are representing the entrenched powerful interests that Americans all throughout the country are angry at. Americans are angry about the fact that it seems like the economy is working in the interests of somebody else. They're angry about the fact that the country is getting poorer and poorer. We've got mass unemployment during a pandemic, and it seems like multinational corporations are making out like bandits while the country gets poorer. The question is, what do you do about it? The right wing and the left wing have very different solutions, but it seems like the country is overwhelmingly upset with the situation, while it seems like the interests of big monopolies and global corporations are being put before the public and the public good.
For, what happens in America is of interest, of course, to other people around the world, including myself, great interest. But in the end, it's your internal business. What we are entitled to be worried about is, what does all this mean for America's role in the world? Is there a greater danger of war? After all, Trump didn't start any wars. Not often you can say that about a US president. Is there more danger now that the Obama, Biden, Clinton gang are back in the driving seat of confrontation with Russia, confrontation over Syria, for example? That's what worries a lot of people, Caleb.
Indeed, and it looks like that may be the case. Look, I mean, at this point, we've got American media, as they are leading up to a Joe Biden administration and a changing of hands, they're playing up the fear that perhaps Donald Trump might pull U.S. troops out of Afghanistan before he leaves office, even though the U.S. public wants the troops out of Afghanistan. The people of Afghanistan want the troops out of Afghanistan. We've got American media kind of warning us that Donald Trump may use his final months in office to, pull the troops out of Afghanistan. Like, this is a bad thing. They're fearing that Donald Trump may not fulfill his duty as an interventionist and actually fulfill one of his campaign promises, as he tried and promised to do throughout his presidency, to remove the troops from Afghanistan. And we've got, all the media, playing up the idea of how bad that would be, trying to warn us that would be a bad thing. It seems like they're very afraid of Donald Trump pulling the troops out of Afghanistan. And that is something that the establishment of the United States and the forces dominating mainstream media just don't want.
Now, what about finally the coronavirus and its twin, the collapse in the economy? That seems to me to be, I saw a poll that said most Trump supporters think the coronavirus is more or less under control. Nothing could be further from the truth, could it? And what's happening on the virus? And what's happening in the U.S. economy consequent to it?
Well, at this point, we have massive unemployment. I'm here in New York. Broadway is shut down. I mean, this city has just completely changed. This is not the same city it was before COVID-19. The amount of homelessness, the amount of people that are hungry is just massive. And it's the same all throughout the country. I mean, this has been a devastating pandemic, devastating in the economic sense as well as in the terms of public health. And at this point, people are bracing for what happens next. And I think the fact that Donald Trump seems to have handled it so poorly, and the fact that he couldn't tell his supporters to wear a mask, for goodness sakes, I think that hurt him in the polls. But at the same time, Trump still does maintain a very big base of supporters. And there's a big division about how we respond to COVID-19. Do we need further lockdowns? Do we need to open up and let it take its course? I mean, there is big division in the country because of the economic situation, that this has been so devastating for the U.S. economy. Look, a big base of Donald Trump's support has been fracking corporations, and the slowdown in oil demand has just devastated the frackers. I mean, they have been just devastated. And people are noticing that a lot of the big corporations have seen COVID-19 as a moment to just secure their monopoly, while a lot of smaller businesses have just been crushed. So there's a division about how to respond to the pandemic. The lower levels of capital, the smaller businesses want to open up as quickly as possible. The big corporations are saying, let's keep locked down so we can maintain our monopoly. And there's a big division, and they don't have unity about how to deal with the pandemic. And that seems to be the problem, is that throughout this entire pandemic crisis, there hasn't been a unified vision and a unified strategy about how to deal with it.
Caleb, marvellous to listen to you. Thank you very much indeed for joining us on the mother of all talk shows. Much appreciated.